Minimalism and Money, my personal story behind this incredible lifestyle movement and how it enabled me to find myself and to rebuild myself stronger, wiser, and far more resilient than ever before. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sugar Mama's Fire Play. Today I want to share with you my story, my journey, my self-discovery, I guess you could say, around minimalism. You may not know this, but the New York Times actually quoted me around this lifestyle movement, and I still have to pinch myself when I reread this quote. But this is what they wrote about me. Canna Campbell offers a glamorous version of a life of minimalism and savings. Not spending feels more like a creative challenge connected to a sense of purpose rather than deprivation. Now, whilst this sounds incredibly glamorous and feels incredibly glamorous to be quoted by the New York Times, the truth is, behind minimalism, and for me, my journey behind minimalism actually was born out of a really scary, frightening time in my life. It was born out of when I was in the thick of postnatal depression, which was triggered by post-traumatic stress syndrome. I was completely lost. I was so scared, and I was so scared of myself. And at the same time, I felt this push-pull because I was also desperate to try and get out of this darkness, but all I could see was darkness. So I felt incredibly trapped, overwhelmed, and scared, frightened, just to a horrific place. And I owe so much of my healing to discovering minimalism. So today I want to share with you my story behind minimalism. I do have other podcast episodes around this, but I want to sort of explain to you where it began and where it took me and where it sits in my life today, because I feel like it still adds so much value. It still is my go-to. It is still my anchor that keeps me grounded, mindful, and intentional at so many times in my life. And I'm incredibly grateful for the way this literally fell in my lap. So I distinctively remember discovering minimalism. I was in my old house and I was just so depressed. I was so scared, and I was just having this continuous horrible flashback that goes in hand with post-traumatic stress syndrome. And as I stood in the kitchen, around me was just so many items. Rocco was still a newborn baby, and so I had so many gadgets and gizmos out on display that I was told I had to have when I became a mother, and I willingly purchased absolutely everything, just wanting to be the best mother I could possibly be and be, organized and, have it all together. But the truth is, it was far from together. And looking at all these things, which were predominantly plastic, just made me feel like I was drowning. I was absolutely suffocated. There was this loud vibration of noise, distraction, and clutter around me, and I just couldn't see through the forest. And I just couldn't see any sense of hope in my life. Now, in that moment, I came across something online about minimalism and the minimalists, which I know a lot of people have discovered minimalism through these two incredible people. And from there, I went on a bit of a binge, discovering more people who had adopted this lifestyle change where you embrace less, you get rid of anything that doesn't offer value in your life, and you live a life that is more meaningful, more connected, and therefore gives you a deeper sense of authentic happiness. And I really do believe it works and it helps, amongst obviously many other things, including professional help and that desire to help yourself with the backing and support of people who love you the most, such as family and friends. Now, in that exact moment, I started to declutter the kitchen. I responsibly and respectfully released those items. And when I say responsibly, I'm talking about the planet. I didn't go and just dump things in the bin. I donated things, I gave things to family and friends, and of course I sold things through Gumtree at the time. As each item left my home, as I released it, it felt like a layer was being peeled back, and it became addictive. My kitchen within a week looked and felt so different. There was a sense of tranquility and calm restored. It felt like a nice, safe place for me. It felt like I had some sense of control and order in my life, which for me, inside my head, I had no control and no order. I could actually breathe again, and it felt really nice. It felt even a little bit liberating. So I continued on with this, and I let the idea and the concept and the practical side of minimalism just organically guide me. And where it took me to was my bedroom, in particular my wardrobe. And I found myself going through slowly and mindfully each drawer, each cupboard, and discovering things about myself as I went through and examined each individual item that I'd purchased. I discovered I'd been buying things that actually didn't suit me. It was me trying to be something I wasn't, or not upholding my values. And I could see things like fast fashion. I could see items that actually weren't fast fashion, but didn't actually match my value system of quality or classic timeless style, or weren't actually my color palette. But this time, as I went through my wardrobe, I decided to do a little bit different. I wanted to learn more about this. So I went through very slowly, really examining the story behind each of those items. Where did I buy it from? What was my headspace at the time? What was going on in my life? What was the trigger for me to go and buy something? And I realized how I had lost myself, how I'd gone down this path of distractions and temptations and trying to be something that I wasn't. So I made myself really pay attention to each piece I was letting go, but also which piece in my wardrobe that I was choosing to keep. And I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about the items that I love in my wardrobe, the fabrics, how they make me feel, how they serve my life, how they serve my lifestyle. What's the style and taste that I really appreciate, that I really respect, really admire. And from that, it even allowed me to respect and admire other people's style and sense that were uniquely and individually their own. I could sit back and look at them from afar and enjoy it and respect it without trying to copy them or be like them. Each item I looked at, touched, examined, allowed me to understand more about who I am and how I show up today and how I want to show up differently in a better, more authentic version of myself. Now, this theory, this concept, this practical approach went into so many other areas of my life, including to a certain degree my lifestyle and how I chose to spend my time. Weekends started to be a little bit more different. They were spent with my true authentic friends, my inner circle. And I realized that I actually love spending more time one-on-one with friends rather than with large groups of people. I also realized that I love having people in my home and in their home as well, rather than going to, say, a loud, busy bar or a pub or even a restaurant. And then I found myself taking my love of minimalism to my wallet. Now, ironically today, I can say I actually don't really have a wallet, but I went through my wallet. I decluttered my wallet, old receipts, cards that I no longer really needed or used. I then decided to then go from my wallet to my bank accounts, simplifying the number of savings accounts that I had. You know, those little tiny accounts, you think, oh, I'll open that up and that will be my goal to save up for this item, but it kicks off with $20 and then nothing really happens. I culled absolutely everything, looking to really simplify, but also to make my whole banking system efficient. I also got rid of any old payee accounts and biller codes that weren't actually relevant in my life and I didn't actually need to use. So suddenly my internet banking just looked so much neater. I then, of course, went through my budget, looking at duplicates, looking at ways I was, wasting money on things that I didn't actually really need in my life and didn't actually add any value whatsoever. I looked at my investments in my share portfolio, the investments in my entire portfolio. What actually worked? What was actually aligned to my goals? And what was just an idea or a bit of an experiment that had kind of just flatlined or sometimes even backfired? Everything got cleaned up. Anything that didn't serve me, I just got rid of. I consolidated and I just looked at making things nice and clean and simple. That is what I wanted in my life. My superannuation account, that was actually already consolidated, but I looked at the underlying investments. What tweaks and changes did I need to make? And a classic example of this was leaning towards more listed investment companies and ETFs, not having to burden myself with the stress and time of having to constantly pick individual stocks for my share portfolio, my superannuation investment portfolio. And of course, going through my insurances, I remember discovering that I had a couple of really minor, insignificant, to be honest, waste of value insurance policies that were accidental policies or accidental death policies that were attached to a credit card. I didn't actually need that because I had sufficient life cover. And no, that's not advice to go and do that. But for me, these were duplicates. They weren't costing huge amounts of money, something like $6 a month, but it was a duplicate of something I didn't actually need and I had far better cover that served me elsewhere. So suddenly my finances felt lighter. I had so much more clarity and my wallet suddenly became lighter as well. I didn't have just stuff in there that I just didn't need. And I was able to downgrade to a much smaller wallet as well. And then, of course, it then led to my goals, my financial goals, that is, in my life. The goals that I was working on. And instead of having a long list of different goals for different things, I started to condense and make these goals concise, learning to rewrite my goals in a way that incorporated a couple of goals into one simple sentence. And it just suddenly felt different. It felt more me, it felt more empowering, and it felt far more exciting. I wanted to work on myself. I wanted to work on my personal growth. I wanted to work on finding my authentic self, even if I had never actually had found it in the first place. I was determined to find myself again amongst all the distractions and all the heavy load of toxic things that were going on in my life at the time and had been bubbling away and boiling in the background that just needed to be dealt with and cleaned up and fixed for the final times that it no longer held me back in life. Now, I can proudly say that minimalism gave me so much richness and wealth in my life. Minimalism gave me back time. I didn't have to spend time looking after things, running things to get fixed, replacing things all the time because I realized I didn't need all those things. It also gave me back so much more energy because I wasn't wasting any time. And with less things in my life, I had less distractions, less temptations, less noise. It just gave me a greater sense of purpose. And the space was just liberating and gave me even more lightness and energy and focus. You know, my brain finally had perspective again, which I think for me personally, when I was going through such a deep, dark, scary depression, I had no perspective. I couldn't see through the fog, the thickness. And when I got rid of the things in my life that weren't serving me, I was able to step back and see some light. It's that classic saying, you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. Stepping out of the jar through minimalism allowed me to be able to read the label and to make the adjustments in my life. And every time a little bit of lightness appeared or a layer came back or a space was opened up in my life, both physically and mentally, I kept going. I felt inspired to just allow this to just keep guiding me, almost like a trail. I was like a child picking up, Easter eggs. I saw an Easter egg, picked it up, loved it, then saw another Easter egg and picked it up and put it in my basket. And before I knew it, I was actually starting to feel mentally better, mentally stronger. And of course, with the backing of professional help along the way, which I'm very open about sharing. And ever so slowly, not only did I get that perspective back again, I actually found my motivation. And this for me was really important because I'm someone who is a highly motivated person. I am very easily inspired. I get a rush of energy and excitement to sink my teeth on something that ignites, when I discover something that ignites within me. And because I had been drowning in so much stuff, I didn't have anything inside me that could possibly be ignited. So when my motivation returned, I knew that this was working and that actually I was going to be able to heal myself, even though it would take time. I had to be gentle with myself, learn to love myself along the way. But I could actually see myself being able to stand on my own 2 feet again, which was so important for me to be able to keep going. And of course, as I decluttered my life and started to release things, not just release things without paying attention, release things and gain valuable insights and wisdom about where I went wrong in the past so that I could then redirect the way that I spent money and even invested money so that it was done in a way that was actually intentional. It matched my goals. It matched my value system. It felt more me. And it was something I desperately needed. So the financial stress really started to subside in my life. And it's a bit of a hard thing with depression and mental health is sometimes we're depressed because of a lack of money or not understanding where we stand financially. So you can very easily get trapped. But minimalism allowed me to move those clouds so I could see what was going on. And then, of course, do the necessary work to not necessarily fix my finances because there wasn't anything fundamentally wrong, but to, create the environment in my head, in my personal physical finances, even in a mental capacity, so that I could then get back on with that financial improvement and financial health. As someone said to me the other day, it's actually really about financial fitness when it comes to looking after your money, not necessarily financial well-being. So where am I today with my journey around minimalism? Well, it's definitely evolved. When I fell into minimalism, Rocco was a newborn baby and he's going to be turning 12 in late June. So I have definitely still lived a life of minimalism. It is my anchor. It is my go-to. Whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed or even exhausted, coming back and re-exploring and reconnecting with what minimalism means to me is how I always quickly find myself again and I bounce back on my feet in a very efficient way. I have had to let myself, release the sense of control that comes with minimalism, because sometimes that can be the dark side of minimalism. It can often be really sense of control and aggression to a certain degree. And having 3 children, and Tom is far from a minimalist, I've had to learn to make peace with what I can control and what I can't. And where I can inspire my children, even Tom, to see the beautiful value of minimalism is something I've had to really learn, because you can't force minimalism upon anyone. Even if you think it's the best thing in the world, you can't dictate or demand other people live a life like that. However, what I have learned is I can lead by example, and I can subtly and gently inspire my family members in my home and see if it rubs off on them. But at no times do I ever dictate or control. I have learned to let go of certain areas. And I think, as I mentioned just a second ago, that sometimes can be a bit of a toxic side of minimalism, the underlying control that you can build. However, there are definitely areas in my life where I still live a life of minimalism. And I have to say that is number 1, furnishings. I have really been careful not to fill my home with lots of furniture, lots of decorative pieces, because it's expensive, but more importantly, it ends up being clutter. It makes it harder to clean my home. It takes so much longer to clean my home. Also, when it comes to food, I only buy what we need. Yes, that means frustratingly more trips to the supermarket, but it means far less waste. We eat up everything we've got before I head to the supermarket. And I also have found that since incorporating minimalism in my life, I eat better. I eat more whole foods. I cook meals that are simple. And because of that, I'm less tempted to go out and spend money on meals that have been pre-prepared and often quite unhealthy. But the one area that has stuck with me with minimalism is in my finances. You see, my goals have still remained to be simple, effective, and efficient. My investments, both in my investment portfolio, my superannuation portfolio, still remain in a minimalistic way. I have a strong bias towards listed investment companies and ETFs. I value what it gives me, that I'm not stuck in front of a computer screen or reading long research reports trying to work out whether I should buy that particular stock and is now the right time to buy this stock and how much money should I be putting into that particular stock. That is what overwhelmed me and consumed me. And I am even a financial planner that does this for a living. But when it came to my own personal finances, I wanted to be able to reduce the stress and to free up my time for the more important things, which is obviously helping other people with their finances. And finally, of course, the minimalism in my finances has definitely stayed true to our budget, our family budget. When I started minimalism, I was on the cusp of becoming a single mother. And obviously today we have a family budget. But again, we have kept our budgets pretty minimal. There is nothing there that we don't value. There is nothing there that we see as a waste. And because we review it on a regular basis, we are right on top of that wastage so we can catch it quickly and let it go. We also don't beat ourselves up when natural temptation and distractions come our way, which is another toxic side, I think, of minimalism, where you can beat yourself up for letting old habits die hard. By regularly checking in on yourself as to how your journey with minimalism is going is something I highly recommend. And I will share with you if you want to start applying this in your life in just one second. So as I get close to wrapping up today's episode, I want to just quickly summarize how minimalism has added value in my life from a financial point of view. So number 1, clarity. I know exactly where we stand financially because I have gotten rid of the excess, the clutter, the noise, the distractions, the temptations. From that, I can then see what is a priority in our life. If our mortgage isn't reducing like I would normally like it to be, I can quickly see that because I have that clarity. And because I have that clarity, I can see what is actually working in our lives. We're sticking to our budget. We're sticking to our budget throughout pay cycles. I can also see what's not working. Looking at our insurance premiums that have gone up, I can quickly go in and check, do we have the right amount of cover? Perhaps we're overinsured, or perhaps there are some changes we can make. I have that clarity that allows me to see what to get onto and what to get on quickly. But best of all, because I have clarity, I can see how we are progressing. How are we progressing towards those clear, exciting, empowering goals that we have in our lives? And that sense of progression is really important because it gives me a sense of relief, which I'll come to in a second as well. The second benefit of minimalism and money in my life is purpose. Because our goals are really simple, they have been combined and they are concise. They really inspire us. They fuel us with energy and motivation, as well as the required determination and commitment to help make these happen. I don't live in la la land. I'm not delirious. I don't live in a fantasy land where I think we're going to create financial freedom overnight. I know where we stand financially, and I know exactly how long it's going to take us to get there. And because of that clarity and that understanding as to what we're working on, what's working, what's not, it's given me a huge sense of purpose, which I love to then fuel with everyone else around me. As I say, energy is contagious. I hope you're catching mine. And then, as I said, I mentioned relief. I can see all the hard work coming from seeing that progress. I can see that the hard work is paying off. I can see that the sacrifices are worth it. And yes, of course, it feels painfully slow at times. And that is often because it is painfully slow. But I know that each bit of progress is building my mental and financial fitness and resilience. So when setbacks happen, which happen in my life, I promise you, because I have been able to make progress in the past, and I know that progress because I've got that clarity. I know that if we have a setback or a challenge or a block or an obstacle, I know that I can do it again because I've done it before. And that is really important. Now, if you're listening to this and go, okay, I need to learn more about minimalism, and I really want to look at applying minimalism in my financial life for more efficiency, for more clarity, for more purpose, and to be able to gain that relief, that financial relief that Ken is talking about right now, this is where I recommend you start. Number one is really lean into where you feel inspired to just kick off. For me, it was my kitchen. But for you, it might be your wardrobe, or it might be something like your car. Go through and start physically decluttering. Look at each item, but don't just mindlessly discard items. Mindfully release them. Of course, always uphold the planet. This is not about throwing a whole pile of stuff in the bin and ending up in landfill. Absolutely not. You want to make sure that minimalism changes you for your higher good and with long-term growth and development. So as you look at something that is not serving you purpose, stop, question yourself, why did I buy this? What was the catalyst? Who recommended this? What is it that I don't like about this? How am I going to stop myself falling into this trap again? Pay attention and be intentional. And the same goes for when you discover things that you want to keep in your life. What is it that I love about this? Why would I never, ever get rid of this? Why is it so special? What's the story behind it? How am I going to take better care of it so that I can keep it in my life? These are the nuggets of gold that will help make your journey of minimalism richer and fuel your personal growth and development, as well as help find deeper, more authentic happiness. Now, start small, start simple. And as I said, you could start with your wardrobe, your kitchen, or maybe something even smaller, like one drawer or one cupboard. But as you are going, notice how you're feeling. Notice what your body and your mind and your soul is trying to tell you. And think about where you want to go next. What other area do you want to tackle in your life? As I said, I started in my kitchen, and then I felt a calling to my wardrobe. And then I felt a calling from my wardrobe to my wallet, and then my personal finances, and then my lifestyle. Allow it to organically take you, to lead you, to guide you. And I promise you this, you will see a profound change in both your home, your headspace, and your health, which of course includes your financial health. So there you have it, my story behind how and why I discovered minimalism, and why it is so important to me today, just as much as when I first lent into this incredible lifestyle movement. Whilst at times I naturally get distracted like any other normal person, I always come back to minimalism as my anchor. Like a trusted friend, it always helps ground me, recalibrate me, and reset me so I can find myself again and get back on track with whatever I'm working on in my life. So please let me know if you have any questions at all about minimalism or about minimalism and money. Feel free to send any of your questions to me on Instagram, or of course, please leave a rating and review and I'll come back to you as soon as possible. And if you have any particular topic requests, please don't be shy. Feel free to send me a message, or again, as I said, put them in the ratings and review. All right, thank you so much for listening to this personal story of mine. If anyone is listening to this and is in a dark place, please always put your hand up and ask for help. But at the same time, also learn to help yourself so that you can experience your own beautiful growth, development, and adventure ahead of you, where you learn so much about yourself and learn that the darkness can actually help you find a unique beauty and sacred space within yourself. Thank you, everyone. This is Sugar Mama's Fire Play.